Welcome to College Recruiter, where we believe that every student and recent grad deserves a great career. I'm Anna Peters, and I am very happy to be joined today by Angela Ciborowski, who is she's an associate director at EY, and she's the MBA Strategic Programs lead. So she advises MBA recruiting. And today we're going to talk about how young women who are interested in going into business can empower themselves to succeed. And Angela is the perfect person to talk to because she's so passionate about empowering women in business. In fact, 3 years ago, she created the Empower You Graduate Women's Leadership Conference. And that is designed to lead, inspire, and motivate future women leaders. So we're going to get into her advice. Angela, I'm going to tap your brain into your advice for young women who are interested in going to business. Thank you for being here.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So first of all, I noticed that in order to apply for the Empower You conference, to attend, you ask applicants one essay question, and that is for them to describe something or someone who inspired them to take action that resulted in a positive change. Why is this question so important?
So I think that essay topic really reflects the kind of people that we're looking to hire at EY and specifically into consulting. We're looking for people who see a problem and they get excited about it and they want to dive in and tackle that problem and solve it. And so that question is really important because this conference is a very small, intimate conference, and it's designed for us to really give women a chance to network and with one another and build their professional skills. So we want to look for those problem solvers. And when you go into consulting, that's essentially what you're being hired to do, is you're being hired to be a problem solver. And so we're looking for people that get excited about those challenges and are excited to take on some of our clients' biggest challenges and tackle them.
Okay, that makes sense. Can you tell us a little bit of a personal story? So what are some of the hurdles that you in your career have had to jump over, and do you see young women today, either in your recruiting or at the conference, do you see them facing some of the same hurdles, and what do you tell them? How do you advise them?
Yes. So absolutely. I mean, there are hurdles that both men and women face, but I think there are some hurdles that are more unique to women. And this comes up time and time again, especially with the MBA women that we're recruiting. They're at that time in their life where they're debating family and career, and there's a lot of things that they're balancing. And even for somebody coming right out of an undergraduate program, eventually, I think most women will get to that point. Not all, but most will get to that point where they really decide, how do I balance all of that? And so I want to touch on that in particular because that's something that I definitely struggled with, and something that most women ask me about. And so I have a great personal story for you. I have two daughters, 14 and 11, and I've been with EY for 17 years. And back when I was when my first daughter was born, the firm was doing a good job of supporting women who were wanting to return to work. I would say, we had flexible work arrangements and opportunities to work virtually, things like that. And so a lot of my friends, unfortunately, did not have those same opportunities. They were essentially forced to make a decision to leave the workforce or stay at home and raise a family. So I was very fortunate that I didn't have to make that choice, but I still had all that guilt, that mom guilt that we put on ourselves because that's just how we're wired. And, I was going back and forth and talking to a colleague of mine, also a mom, and she said to me, she said, you're really thinking about this in the wrong way. And you have an opportunity now to be a role model for your daughter.
Absolutely.
And what a great opportunity to show her that you can be a great mom and a professional.
Mm-hmm.
And it just hit me. It was almost like she flipped that script in my head. And, I was kind of talking to myself from a different place. And when she gave me that advice, it really impacted me.
Yeah, even hearing you say that, and I have younger children,
right.
The same conversation I've had similar conversations, and it just kind of gives you tingles. Like,
It
oh, I can make this work.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was that empowerment I felt after we had that conversation. And, thank goodness that she gave it to me straight and said, hey, you're not looking at this the right way. For me personally, I really did want to continue working. And, I was the first in my family to get a college degree. My dad worked hard to put me through school with no debt coming out. And so it was really important to me that I continue that legacy and work. And that's just personal for me. So when she said that, it again empowered me to say, hey, I can do both. And so I've been with EY, like I said, 17 years, which is incredible nowadays. And I have my second child. I have another working arrangement than I had from the first time I came back. So again, a lot of flexibility. And I've seen a lot of women coming back into consulting who have made it work. There are things that you can do. There's a lot of companies like ours will do a transition plan when you're coming back. So maybe you're working on local engagements for a while until you're ready to get out there and traveling. Our company and others offer lactation programs so that when you're traveling, it's possible to still provide for your child. Great benefits, personal and family coaching, as well as networks that we have of working moms. And that is so powerful. Again, back to my story, I think that women supporting one another is something that is really important.
Definitely.
So I think that is inevitably a question I always get from women, especially those wanting to go into consulting. And so that's my story that I try and share.
Do you see women who even years before they plan to have a family, do you see them hesitate in taking maybe stretch assignments or a particular position or at a particular organization where they know they're going to be stretched professionally? Do you see them hesitate compared to men because, well, what if 5 years from now I'm going to want to have a kid and this organization or this position is going to be too much? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yes. I would say not as much, thankfully, anymore. I think there's a lot more that we're doing to empower our young women to still take those chances and opportunities as they're presented. If things change, right? And so I think it's important that we still take those opportunities as they come our way. And then when we're in a place where we need to pivot because of personal situation, then we do. It's funny that you say that, men tending to take these stretch assignments. I have read a lot of books and I'm going to recommend a few later on. But, one stat I heard is that I think it's women, in order to accept a role, they feel like they need to check 90% of the qualifications around there of that job. And for men, I want to say it's something like 40%. Mm-hmm. And so, the point of that story is we have to be a little bit more less risk adverse and take those opportunities a little bit more because our male counterparts are, and they're figuring it out as they go, and we have to be comfortable doing the same thing.
Sure. Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, exactly.
Age-old advice.
Right. Yep.
So I want to ask you about mentorship because a lot of organizations in their effort to include and support women have a mentorship program. And of course, that can't be your only solution, but let's talk about mentorship. And I recently had a conversation with Cy Wakeman, who is a global thought leader and international speaker in leadership and management. And she actually advises young women and men against having one or even a couple mentors. And her argument is, when you do that, you're kind of you're whittling away, you're narrowing down all the possible advice you might get from the whole wide world into just a few pinpoints or data points, as she puts it. So it's better, she says, to do kind of a crowdsourcing approach and just, ask a lot of people for advice. Don't focus on one or two relationships. Can you speak to that? When it comes to mentoring, what is your preferred approach?
I absolutely agree with that advice. I think that is really important. And what's hard is we tell our young folks coming in, build your network, but we really don't tell them how to do that. And so it's hard because they think, well, now what? I have all these people around me. How do I do that? And I'll draw an analogy. So in consulting, we are very big on diversity of thought. When we go to our clients, it's important that we're bringing different perspectives around the table to address the client's issue. And through that diversity of thought, we come to the best answer. And so I would take that same approach with your network. If you only gravitate towards people that are just like you, or you're only looking for female mentors or male mentors, you're missing out on a lot of different perspectives and experiences that can help shape you. So I 100% agree with seeking out male and female mentors for young women. I also would recommend that you go about it in a very thoughtful way. So I've seen this happen where some of our young women will come in, and men, not just women, but young women and men will come in and they will try and build that network. So what do? They try and get a meeting with somebody in senior leadership. And then they kind of sit down and they don't know what to ask, and they don't know how to utilize that time. And it's just not very thoughtful. So I would suggest that you make a list, and I'm very big on lists of threes. So think about maybe the 3 things you want to work on in the next year or 2. Is it how to have a bigger voice in meetings? Is it polishing technical skills? Is it being more comfortable in client situations? Is it presence or public speaking? So really think about what those key areas are for you. And I wouldn't go too far out, keep it easy, 1 to 2 years out, because that's typically you're looking ahead the next year or 2, right? When you're looking to get promoted. And then look at the people around you, both male and female, and think about who does those things really well. You might have one person that's really strong technically in an area you need to develop, and somebody else who's just so fantastic at client relationships. And then once you've identified who those people are, you can schedule a meeting and actually have one thing that you're focusing on and say to that person, in the next year or in the next 2 years, I really want to focus on this. And I have observed that you are fantastic in this area. What advice can you give me? And it just makes that conversation so much more productive, and you'll get a lot more out of it when you have that kind of, you know the direction that you're headed. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and to be able to make smaller asks. So you're not sitting down, like you said, with a senior leader and kind of expecting them to pave the way for you.
Right.
You have kind of a basket of people of whom you ask smaller things.
Right.
Segmented parts of your path.
Exactly.
I want to talk about relationships and how you advise young women to build business relationships, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's a big part of the Empower You conference, is to start establishing and maintaining those new relationships and cultivating them. Do you have different tips when it comes to relationships for women? Excuse me, let me say this right. So when it comes to young women building relationships with other women as opposed to building relationships with other men, do you have different advice?
So yes. And, I kind of touched on this, I think, in the last question where we were talking about developing a wide network. So yes, it's important to have males and females in that network. But, I think when it comes to just the way, I'm going to take this question and actually give suggestions on 2 books. And this is where I think women need to start, is kind of starting with this foundation of understanding the research and the biology behind why men and women are different. Because once you understand why, it makes it so much easier to navigate those relationships in the workplace. So there's 2 books. The first is called The Confidence Code by Claire Shipman. And she really talks about the biological differences, again, between men and women and how that manifests itself in the workplace. And then another great book is called In the Company of Women, and that is by Patricia Heim. And we actually worked with the Heim Group to create some internal personal and professional development learnings for our women. And and one of those sessions was called Invisible Rules. And this comes from the Heim Group, and it really talks about those invisible rules that exist. We don't even know that they're there, but they are in the workplace between men and women, and how things really are one way when we're young, and then they shift completely when we're older and in the workplace. And we're not sure how to manage that shift, right? So starting by understanding the reason behind that, I think helps position you much better. So those two books I would highly recommend. But we took the content from Invisible Rules, we brought it to Empower You, we shared it with the women, and it was so powerful because we really showed them that, like they say, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. There's biology in that. It truly is the case. So, I talked about women sometimes needing to check 90% of those qualifications before they're going to apply for something or raise their hand and take on a project or initiative. And men, it might only be 40% of those qualifications that they feel they need. It could be also recognizing there's differences in our nonverbal cues that we give one another. So women tend to be more expressive when we're interacting with one another and nodding our heads and really helping to agree with the other person, where men are maybe tend to be thinking as you're talking to them. So recognizing that those are just differences, and it helps with the relationships then that you're trying to build, and gives you a little bit more, I guess, it makes you not as nervous about having some of those interactions.
Nervous and also judgmental. I mean, I think you could take what you just said and expand that when it to the broader sphere of working in a diverse workplace.
Right.
So if you're going to work well with people who are different from you, you have to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
They're different. Their perspective is different from yours, and that's not bad. It's just different.
Exactly. Yeah. So those two books I think are really great because they address those things, and it gives you a really good starting point going into your professional career.
Great. Good advice. Mm-hmm. Angela, I want to talk about leadership and how it has changed a little bit. The kind of leadership that is needed in today's business is no longer the command and control that was typical 50 years ago. You might still find that, but generally business leaders agree that that's not how it should work anymore. Right. In fact, I might argue that in order for businesses to compete in today's climate, they need leaders who espouse more traditionally feminine qualities. Active listening, for example, maybe collaboration and empathy you hear about a lot. So can you speak to how you motivate, or how women can motivate themselves to trust their natural abilities and imagine themselves as a leader, as opposed to trying to reshape themselves to fit a different leadership persona?
Right. I think you hit the nail on the head. This is something that's so important for young women to really recognize, is that you don't have to change yourself going into your career to get ahead. You don't have to mask those natural tendencies or qualities that we have as women that are so important and really necessary in a leader. So I think that, first, again, it's starting off, as I mentioned, the books I recommended, understanding why those qualities are so important. But it's also recognizing that there are different social styles that people have. So sometimes you do need to flex, right? When you're having an interaction with someone or you're leading a team, you might need to flex a little bit. But I think the most important thing is not masking who you are, because eventually you can't live in that, what am I trying to say?
With the mask on.
Yeah, you can't live with the mask on forever. And, it's important that your true self comes through, or else you're never going to feel fulfilled. You're never going to feel like you're giving your best self to your work or your clients. And so, yeah, I think it's extremely important that we tell our young women to embrace those things, not try and change who they are, or try and speak differently in the workplace, or have more of a commanding presence because they think that's what they need in order to get where they want. It's so much more important that we support one another, not tear each other down, promote one another. I think that's the best thing a woman can do in the workplace, is to promote another female colleague, and not be threatened by that. That's something that is really important for all of us. And so, yeah, I think that's my advice, is to just don't lose sight of who you truly are, because that's what you're being hired for.
I think that resonates so much more with Gen Z coming in and out of college almost.
Right.
Because of their expectation for authenticity. I mean, I think, women of maybe even millennials, but especially Gen X and definitely the baby boomer generation, that's probably a hard sell, to be
Yes.
authentic. Don't mask your qualities to fit somebody else's expectations. That's a hard concept for other generations. But with Gen Z, I think it is exactly what they expect and want.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree. When I started my career 20 years ago, it was very much, there's a hierarchy and this is where you fit. And for men and women, there was, very clear lines. And as I've progressed in my career, and EY has grown as other companies grow and change and embraced, the new the thoughts that are coming in from from Gen Z, et cetera, it's really amazing how, like you said, women, I think, are becoming more comfortable with that. And, the women that we're hiring do have a stronger voice. It's really exciting. Again, I have 2 girls, so I'm looking ahead at them and when they're going to be in the workforce, and I want them to feel confident when they go in and to give their opinion just like anyone else. But you're right. I think that's something that we're still struggling with, because we're still new at that, and something that we're kind of trying to catch up to.
I think it's exciting times for women. I mean,
Yes.
We saw a lot happen in the last year,
Right.
and I think we'll continue to see progress in business. So,
Right.
Strong insight. Thank you so much for and there's more. So, anytime you want to continue the conversation.
Yeah. No,
Good.
I love this. And yeah, any other topics that I can, help with. And I have other colleagues too that are fantastic. I can direct you to. So